Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to our pre-420 celebration. I'm your host, Wes Winton. I'm the Director of Marketing here at GreenBroz, and I'm so jazzed that you're going to spend the next hour with us. Thank you. We got a great panel lined up for you today, but before we get to that, I have a few points that I wanted to touch on for y'all. It's April, and that means GreenBroz is giving you some sweet discounts. We're actually offering 4.2% off of all of our machines or systems. If you follow us, you know we don't do this very often. So if you want to save a little cash on a machine, now's the time to do it. Take a look. If you have questions, you can hit us up at GreenBroz.com/contact, or you can reach out to your territory manager for more info. If you have questions for our panelists today, please throw them in the chat, and we'll be sure to answer them in the Q&A section of this webinar coming up at the end. And be sure to stick around till the end. We have a series of giveaways that we're going to do today, culminating in a $1,000 grand prize in GreenBroz bucks that you can use on any machine or system. We're going to be giving that away at the end. But let's run one quick giveaway just to show you how it works. Some cool GreenBroz prize packs. We're going to pull this from our attendees list. All right. Very cool. We'll make sure we get Michael some awesome things. Cool. All right, guys. Before we introduce our panelists, I have a quick video I want to share with you from the GreenBroz team and some of our partners from around the industry.
Hello, everybody. My name is Raymond. I'm the production manager here at GreenBroz.
I'm Jordan, and I'm the process manager here at GreenBroz.
My name is Emilio. I am the head of purchasing here at GreenBroz.
Hi, everybody. My name's Emily. I'm the sales director here at GreenBroz. Happy 420.
What I enjoy most about working in a manufacturing aspect of the cannabis industry is being able to give a lot of these self-starters, smaller businesses, people who genuinely care about the product that they're making, either for medicinal purposes or just recreational at this point, the better way to utilize their time.
When we say that we're industry born, what we mean by that is that we are purpose built for the cannabis industry. We did not start manufacturing any of our equipment for any other purpose other than to be the best quality processing equipment for cannabis specifically.
For growers and growers.
I've always been more of a believer that we can find solutions in nature and listen to our bodies and do what we can to do what's best for ourselves. But being able to contribute in the way of our machinery means a lot to me personally.
I think another interesting facet of working here at GreenBroz is knowing that we don't just make machines that, round peg and a round hole. We are able to look at facilities and the needs of the market and tailor our machines and what we do here. And it feels really good to be a part of a team that could look at issues and solve them, and not just throw something out there and hope it works, but actually address all of the issues and come to you with a solution rather than just something you buy.
Happy 420, guys.
Hey guys, Austin, based out of Southern California. Happy 420. Happy 420, guys.
Happy 420.
Happy 420.
Happy 420.
Happy 420 from GreenBroz, baby. Hell yeah. It's all good.
Awesome. Well, everybody, without further waiting, I'd like to introduce our panel. First today, we have the host of Royal Grown Radio and the director of marketing and brand development at Royal Gold, Mr. Michael Beck. Hey, Michael.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Wes. It's a pleasure.
Hey, the pleasure is all mine, man. I'm glad you're here. Next, we have the founder and CEO of GreenBroz, Mr. Colin Reichart.
Thanks, Wes. Michael, it's good to see you.
Hello, Colin.
What's up, Colin? Glad you're here. Next, we have attorney and advocate and recent member of High Times, top 100 most influential folks in the cannabis industry, Cheryl Marie Powell.
Hi,
Cheryl.
really glad to be here. Thanks for having me. GreenBroz, happy 10th anniversary. I didn't realize it was such a milestone.
Yeah, I know it's a decade. We will definitely ask Cullen later what a decade in the cannabis industry has been like.
Well, my hair changed color. Does that indicate anything?
I've only been here for a year, man, and my hair's changing color. Does that indicate anything?
It'll get you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And lastly, but definitely not leastly, we have Mr. Ed Rosenthal, author of the Cannabis Growers Handbook, about a dozen other books, and industry legend. What's up, Ed? Happy 420.
Happy 420, everyone.
Thank you for being here. And thank you all, and happy 420 to everybody out there in the audience. I want to jump right in today by asking all of our panelists who, show of hands, who has been in the industry? We know Cullen, 10 years. Who's been in the industry 10 years or more? Hands, we have Michael, Cullen. Oh, okay. How about 15? Michael, Ed. Okay, great. Well, I'll start with you guys then. I want to ask what, and we can go to Ed first. What was the industry like when you entered into it? What kind of things have you seen change through your time here?
When I entered the website, can you hear me?
You're not really. While Ed's getting his tech figured out, maybe we can go to Michael and just ask, Michael, when did you enter into the industry and what was it like when you got here, and what are some of the things you've seen change in the last amount of years? Michael, we can't hear you at all anymore. It's all right. We'll fix this in post. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Well, my 6 or 7 years have been fantastic.
There you go, Cheryl.
Heck yeah, Cheryl.
We'll get it done.
I'm the baby in the family. I'm the baby in the room for the first time in a long time.
Well, can you maybe speak to
That's awesome. Though. I do have a question kind of to go along with that, Cheryl. I mean, the legal climate has obviously radically changed even in the time that you've been involved.
It really has. When I first got involved, I was very enamored. Again, I've been a supporter of legacy since I've been in college. So, but getting into the legal industry, I was definitely enamored with the idea of making change, the idea of doing something historical. So I literally put blinders on and I was just like, legalize. And I would go from state to state to state. And because there's such a distinction from one state to the other, a lot of things have changed and some places are slower for change. So, in Florida where, there hasn't been around since 2015, except for the recent Black Farmers round, not much has changed. There's just more, dispensing locations, but there aren't that many more license holders. They started out with a round that was supposed to be 5 and has grown to 22. But then around the country, we're seeing thousands in some states. So, I think the shift in public opinion has impacted legalization. I think the impact cannabis legalization has had on the political process has led to change as well. So politicians know, in certain markets, if they want to win, they need to incorporate cannabis somehow in their platform. So it's almost like using the industry for political gains, but the industry has benefited as well. So from a legal perspective, the range of things that we do for our clients has definitely changed. And then there's been an evolution as far as, accessibility. And we, in recent years, saw some efforts around, equity and what that looks like. And now that we have this booming industry, those of us who were originally activists just for legalization are actually reaching back and saying, hey, not so fast. Let's get our legacy folks on board as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the things I reflect on a lot is when you start to solve one problem, you end up finding out you have a lot of other ones as well. Cullen, can I get your perspective as a business owner on what you've seen happening in the industry over the last more than a decade now?
Yeah, I mean, it basically the industry has grown like any other, right? We've seen companies come in to fit all the different niche needs for cannabis. So you've seen kind of companies come in and with guys come in with ideas out of their garage and they start building stuff and they make it and they get some sales and some of those guys end up becoming companies and becoming kind of well known in the industry space. And then like we've built, we've gone from being a one product company to multi-product company, and now we're a pretty legitimate, decent sized, mid-sized business, internationally known. So what you're seeing is just a maturing of companies as they've grown up, kind of, just trying to stay alive and survive, to being actually legitimate full-size businesses and creating, there's a whole economy around it, right? The cannabis economy, there's a whole support economy around it too. Companies like mine, companies that supply, growing materials and fertilizers and stuff like that, the lighting companies. I mean, there's a huge amount of support around the industry. So we still struggle. I think most cannabis companies that are cannabis still struggle with the traditional banking and stuff like that, which is, we're going to have to deal with for a little bit longer, I guess. But, for the most part, I think it's probably very similar to any other kind of fledgling industry, right? It started out very just fixed problems to being companies with ideas and visions and goals and direction. And, like we're trying to set course for how the industry does business, right? Well, 5, 6, 7 years ago, we were just trying to solve a problem, so here we are kind of thinking forward, trying to get the solutions. I think which is happening all the way around the industry as it matures and people start to get better focus of what's happening, right? We can start to plan and start to think about how that's going to work. I remember watching Ed's presentation several years ago when he was talking about how big ag, and how cannabis is going to look a lot like that, with all the different manufacturing and kind of ideas that are incorporated in big ag are going to hit cannabis, and he's not wrong. I mean, that's what's happening. You're seeing that kind of massive scale and production kind of grab a hold of cannabis. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, and it's good to see that, a company like yourself, you said you started out basically garage style or start like a true startup, grow to the point where you're able to employ the people that you're able to employ. We saw the video of your, diverse group of employees, and also the fact that, you contribute to a lot of the conferences and the education. So, GreenBroz is one of the primary sponsors to a number of the conferences that we see. I want to shout out to Lance, my good friend, who I usually connect with at these conferences. But just taking that concept from Ed, as far as we're going to look more agricultural, we're going to look more pharmaceutical as well. And that all stems from the need to innovate. And those companies that embrace that need to innovate are the ones that are still standing and will, be in existence post federal legalization. But for the ones that are resistant to that evolution, and again, we have to keep our cultural identity as cannabis. I might take it to this point of as stoners, as activists, and keep that cultural identity. But we can't be afraid to innovate. So I'm really glad that Colin, you've incorporated that in what you do, but you've also given back to the activists and the educational conferences, and that's really important. And that's why you're going to have the support of the people as things change, as you grow, as we have these new entrants from traditional industry, because you are a part of our ecosystem. You are a part of the tapestry that is cannabis, but you're not afraid to innovate.
Ed, I have to ask you, what did people look at you like when you said cannabis is going to be like big ag back in the day?
Well, I've always been called contrarian, and but for instance, I didn't get a lot of hurrahs when I said that Humboldt and Mendocino were going to become backwaters in the cannabis industry, and everybody said, oh, it was going to be, because they had a legacy that was going to be the center, and of course, the center now is in Southern California, in the different areas where they have giant greenhouses and such. Another is around Half Moon Bay and Watsonville is another area for Harborside, for instance, and many others have cultures. So when I said that the industry was going to segment and that it was going to look a lot more like agriculture, I did not get a lot of hurrahs for that either. And
You got a few though, right? I would.
well, actually, people kind of resisted that, and
Yeah.
there are a number of things about this, which means you know, there are good things and bad things. I'm going to go into the bad things first. The bad things are that with this industry now, money is moving up, so that before money was circulated within the community, where you'd have these growers and the dealers, and they were all part of the community, and the money was circulating in the community. And now that it's big business, it's moving up into these billion-dollar corporations and things like that, and you have a differentiation between the good of the consumer and of the good of the producer. For instance, the producers and retailers say, we don't want any of these illegal people, and then you have the legacy producers and the legacy dealers, and so there hasn't been a way to bring them in, so that so once again money moves up, and we've created a number of billionaires out of this, and have not been supporting the community. So that's a really negative thing about it.
Yeah.
And the positive thing about it is that people aren't going to prison, and I think that overrides anything else, or fewer people. But here's where the community interest and corporate interest differ. A number of dispensary organizations are saying, well, we have to control the legacy market. We have to get rid of the legacy market because we're not making enough money. So there's a big conflict. Where do I stand on the conflict? I'm for the consumer. So I think that all these legacy growers, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have to pass certain regulatory hurdles in terms of the hygiene of their product, that their product is hygienic, but just as home people who have a home kitchen can now get licensed to produce food commercially, a certain amount. And I think that there should be general licensing for small commercial growers, so that growers and producers and that those people should be included within the legal community. And that's not happening now. I think that's really important. And the most important thing is that people should be able to grow their own. In 1972, when California had its first initiative, which was also called Prop 19, the byword of it was free legal backyard marijuana. And even in parts of California, we don't have that now. One of the first states to legalize, the state of Washington, home growing is not allowed at all. Absolutely not allowed. So I think that there are a lot of things. And then there's the thing, what if a grower let's say people are allowed 6 plants, which is totally unscientific, and I don't think they could withstand the challenge. Because what 6 plants? Is it a 1-foot plant? Here's a 1-foot plant, or is it this giant plant? So there's no science there's no science for a plant count. But so I think that there's a lot of conflict. Let's say somebody's growing 64 plants in a closet, very small plants in a closet. Well, they're illegal. So and producers, both the producers and the dispensaries and stores want to stamp out the informal market, and so I think that's a big conflict, and I'd hate to see people going to prison for having too many plants in their garden or selling or for sales. I just think that it's that we have to have a way of dealing with that. We can't
Oh,
put more people in prison.
it is disgusting the way that growers have been treated in the past, and I'm happy it's getting a little bit better, but we got a long way to go. I want to see if we have Michael back.
Am I
Michael,
back? Can you hear me?
You are back. All right, let's go.
That's funny. As just really wanting to tie back to the original thing that I was going to say when we had the technical difficulty, and that's the biggest change I've seen in the industry echoes exactly what Ed is talking about, and that's the disappearance of the home grower and the effect that it has on the community and the way that the money flows. And it's no longer, like Ed was saying, this dollar gets spent on cannabis and then continues to go on through its life of voting for change that the cannabis industry and associated people want to see. Organic food, sustainable clothing, things like that, that were a hallmark of cannabis people prior to legalization. And it was home growers, small scale, a huge grow in Humboldt. You know, when I first got into the cannabis scene in the mid 90s was, you know, hundreds of plants, not tens of thousands. So even the largest commercial scenes, which were few and far between in comparison to today, you know, were a fraction of the size. So most cannabis produced domestically was 1, 2, 10, 25 plants. And there was a diversity of genetics everywhere you went. The weed was different, and it was supporting local communities. The attrition of that dollar that entered the industry was far less than it is today through taxation, redistribution, and going up to corporate coffers of billionaires and billionaire hedge funds. So it's very, very difficult to emerge into the cannabis industry now. And I think, Cullen, you could probably echo this. You couldn't do what you did 10 years ago today in this industry, just like Royal Gold could not have built the way we built starting almost 20 years ago today in this industry. So we've drastically limited our creative entrance of innovative brands into the market by the way it's all been restructured.
Yeah, but that, I mean, that's I mean, that's very, Michael, that's very prescient, and it's actually it's very true that, but I mean, as all industries mature, I mean, we all find the same problem, right? You establish the companies that establish a bullhead and get their brand and early mark, kind of have that runway, and then as you get more and more mature in all aspects, you find it more and more difficult to get in, just because the cost of everything, right? So it is an indication of maturing. Some of it's unfortunate and difficult to watch. Some of it is predictable and understandable. The consolidation and the big corporations doing their thing. But the beautiful thing about it is still, you know, a guy that wants to takes very little for a person to grow some of their own. You know, you can still grow really good quality cannabis with very, very little cost, right?
You could grow very mediocre cannabis. I found that out as well.
You can do mediocre really easy. Just throw a seed in the dirt. You know? But it's still kind of amazing. It's easier than alcohol. It's easier than many other things, because it's such a robust plant, and it has such a hardy nature about it. You know, you can kind of, even me with the brown thumbs that I own, can still manage to pull off growing a plant or two. But I think there's still hope. And I hold out hope for you know, that cultural kind of thing. We're kind of going down this direction, maybe the corporate, you know, McDonald's culture direction, but you know, I still hold out hope that you know, the incorporation of legacy and kind of getting back to the roots, and maybe, you know, buying local, support local. I mean, we do this. Yeah. We buy US, support US. I mean, you know, whatever level you can do that on, the better, right? Support local is better. It's always better. So anyway,
this very conversation, I was going to say, this very conversation is why I became a cannabis, agricultural, and dietary supplement attorney, because I wanted to really understand what was next, kind of predicting, like Ed, that we are going to become more like the traditional industries. But to Ed's point, as far as having a place for the small cultivators. They accept that. I don't think any of our cannabis cultivators have any issue with product testing. I think they feel like they'll line right up with product testing. They may even have less contaminants and mildew than we're seeing in our traditional, or I should say non-traditional, in our dispensary spaces. So, just like in agriculture, we have cottage industry law, that there's an opportunity for cottage industry law to include cannabis as well. So there are certain rules for the mass production of cannabis, just like there is for other nutritious items. And then there's cottage industry for your smaller, I go to the farmer's market type of folks. So there's a model that can be followed. And when we just need to look to that. And I think another really good point that Ed brought up was besides home grow, which I'm in complete favor of, and I think home grow is good for our dispensary spaces because they can sell the initial genetics, the starter plants, they can sell the seeds and everything. But there's a point that Ed made that I really want to highlight with regard, and I think Michael also emphasized it with regards to biodiversity. And that's so essential to the plant and the future of the plant. And the knowledge of breeding is really essential as well. So, again, we just, truth be told, and again, I'm going to do a talk at the Cannabis Science Conference about cannabis and trade. But we elevate pirates. We dress as pirates for Halloween, and this is some of the talk that I'm going to give. But we dress as pirates, and we have this love affair with pirates. But when it comes to really giving honor to whether you want to call them smugglers or people who move genetics around the world, it's really the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. So why are they ostracized and villainized and demonized, and then we're going to put on a pirate costume on Halloween? Biodiversity is essential for any type of plant, any type of genetic, and we need to keep that going, and we need to make sure that the laws create a space for that. And I think that's just something I wanted to call attention to, because I think biodiversity is the key. Having just limited strains doesn't benefit again, we started this industry thinking of from a medical perspective, right? So these are patients who have different needs based on different cannabinoids, and different terpene profiles and different flavonoids affect patients in different ways. So with that in consideration, we need to make sure that we promote and continue the legacy with regards to biodiversity.
I'm curious on all your perspective on this. A problem I run into as a marketer a lot is it's hard to educate folks about the issues that are facing our industry, biodiversity being one of them. It's hard to educate folks about like what good cannabis is, honestly. Like, I think we all spend a lot of time in our bubbles, and we speak to folks in the industry, and people know what a terpene profile is. They know what a flavonoid is. Like, it's known. But then when I speak to outside individuals, they mostly say like, this one looks good on Instagram. And I'm curious your thoughts, Cheryl, on how to educate lawmakers and how to educate the general public about these things that matter to us as a cannabis industry.
Yeah, I think there are two questions. The question of what is good cannabis is very different than what is safe cannabis. Mm-hmm. Good cannabis is a term of art. Good cannabis is, like beauty is in the sight of the beholder. Like what does a handsome man look like? That's kind of the same type of question. It depends on who you are, what you're into, and what you love about the plant. But what is a safe product? Fortunately, we have a standards process that's being developed around the world. I'm part of the ASTM D37 executive committee. ASTM International is a over 100-year organization that creates standards that are adopted by governments. And the D37 committee is specifically focused on cannabis. So as they're coming up with standards as far as, intoxicating product versus non-intoxicating product, along with laboratory standards, sanitation standards, and things like that in standards organizations such as ASTM International. And as governments are adopting that and they're learning as well, I think we're moving in the direction of having a safe product. But we need to make sure that as we're putting these guardrails up, they aren't put in place for the benefit of certain companies with a tremendous amount of wealth that will be the only ones to meet that standard. and that it's reasonable and realistic, and that it's necessary. So the key is developing a benchmark of what is safe with regards to contaminants and microbials and things like that, and then making sure that we're setting those minimums in a way that it makes the industry accessible for a diverse group of participants, including small business, people of color, and legacy participants, and that we also put funding, because this is a very lucrative industry. We put funding towards bridging that gap for people who have been traditionally growers, manufacturers, even in the dispensing place, between where they are and where they need to be in order to make these standards. And then we also have a process for feedback and a process for if there are challenges to what we accept, because we've done it in other industries as this is the gold standard, making sure that there's a two-way communication with our indigenous folks and our legacy people who have been slept and played with the plant for all these years. It can't be a one-way communication where it's, this is what we've done as far as high standards, and you need to adopt these high standards. No, the people who understand the plant, who've been responsible for the industry, that have self-regulated for hundreds of years, we need to make sure their input is taken into account as we're developing their standards, and that it's not cost prohibitive for an unnecessary reason.
Well, I would like to disagree with a lot of what you said. First of all, the whole thing about marijuana safety. So, we've been in a marijuana experiment for the last 50 years. Where are the emergency room? Where are all the emergency room cases? Where are all the deaths? Where is all this whole thing about marijuana safety? Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do testing for pathogens, but this whole thing about developing standards and safety, marijuana has been doing pretty well for the last 3,000 years without those standards, and you don't see people in the hospital from using marijuana. So I think that many of those standards are just being put in place to restrict entrance into the industry, and that it's all a lot of crap, or most of it is crap. Aside from testing for pathogens, there's no reason to set a quote standard. What kind of standard? And as far as educating people about marijuana, it's like this. I was in a discussion, a podcast discussion with some people from Humboldt, who said, and the people from Humboldt were saying that they were going to have to educate people about what good marijuana is. Well, I'll tell you what, people are already educated, and it's like this. I like this, I don't like that. So if you don't like it, it's not good marijuana. And the market itself is self-regulating. So the real reason that a lot of these standards are being put in place is to keep out competition. That's the first thing. And the second thing, as far as indigenous is concerned, it's like this. In Jamaica, you cannot buy Jamaican marijuana. Do you know that? Are you aware of that? Well, let me explain. 40 years ago, there was real Jamaican marijuana, and there were a number of varieties of Jamaican marijuana, but it wasn't very strong. So what happened, and this happened in Morocco, Jamaica, and other places parts of India where there's a lot of tourism, what happened is that Western seeds, either from Europe or the United States, came into those countries, and so it was bred with, either intentionally or unintentionally, it was bred with the indigenous product, and it changed the indigenous product. And I have photos from 30 years ago of marijuana, for instance, in Morocco, which was a single stem plant that ripened around August 26th. And now, you don't see those plants. You see multi-branched plants, and that's a result of being crossed both crossed with the improved strains. And what that's done is increase the THC content of the Moroccan, for instance. So when you talk about setting all these standards, it's a lot of crap. You don't set standards for tomatoes. You go to the farmer's market and you look at the tomatoes and you see which ones you want to buy. And that's what this is about. And trying to make a standard and saying, this is good marijuana, this is bad marijuana. No, what you want to do is do what stores have done in California. They list the cannabinoids and the percentages of cannabinoids, and they list a lot of the terpenes, and
that's the standard.
No, that isn't a standard. All it is it's information. It is not a standard. It's just saying this is what the ingredients of this are. And I have some sad news for everybody here. We are all dead men walking as far as cannabis is concerned for one reason. Aside from cannabis that's produced for smoking, directly smoking flower, all cannabis in 10 years is going to be produced by brewing, by putting the cannabis, the genetics
Tissue
to make
culture?
to putting the genetics to make the cannabinoids and the terpenes into yeast, and people will, instead of putting up lights or waiting for a full season to grow cannabis, they'll have THC and the other cannabinoids and the terpenes 6 days after they put the sugar water to brew.
Yeah.
And so that's what
I'd like an opportunity to respond to that comment, if that's possible.
Well, as far
so I think there's that. I saw this happen with alginate years ago in San Diego, where they used to harvest kelp, and there was a big industry. And so part of that was you take the top 6 or 10 feet off of the top of the kelp, and you bring it in, and then you boil it down, and you get the alginate. And then they created a tissue culture that creates alginate. We don't harvest kelp anymore, and it's a pretty stunning development for what was a pretty large industry, and actually had a lot of positives, because we keep all the kelp off the beaches, but now the kelp just falls up on the beaches because nobody does any harvesting anymore. But it is.
I think that's very interesting. I think it's true. I have no doubt that it's true. Like, part of me is pinching myself because I am having this conversation with Ed Rosenthal, who I have so much respect for. But I do want to circle back to a few of the comments. So, we can start with, the standards for tomatoes. There are standards for tomatoes. There's the Food Safety Modernization Act that dictates how agricultural products are produced, and standards around those products, as well as the water that goes into the products, and as well as the soil that goes into those products. So there are standards for traditional foods. Also, just speaking about, and I don't know. I know Ed mentioned that he's disagreeing with me. I almost want to say he was passionately agreeing with me on certain points, such as self-regulation. But going back to the Jamaica part of it, there are still land races. I'm Jamaican there, and I spent, before the pandemic, I spent probably 3 or 4 times in Jamaica. I would go to Jamaica 3 or 4 times a month doing this type of work. So there are still land races in Jamaica. They are protected, but they are still land races in Jamaica.
Look, you know what? All these different companies went searching for that. That is just not true. Everything has been because of open.
They are protected.
They are protected. They can't protect. You can't protect against open pollination, and that's what's happened. The pollen travels for hundreds of miles. So if you have a variety that's not Jamaican growing in Jamaica, the chances are pollen from those varieties is going to get into the the population. And I work with Dr. Michelle over at
I know Dr.
UW,
Michelle. He's on the Bureau of Standards for Jamaica
yeah,
with me.
I
Yeah.
work I work with him on a project, and he'll tell you that there is no pure Jamaican left in Jamaica anymore. Any pure Jamaican is from collectors who collected seeds 30 years ago. Because
Yes, there's
Can
still
we?
pure Jamaican. Go
We've got
ahead,
a few.
Wes. I
We've
just
got a
wanted to
few more
finish my
questions
thought.
to get to, guys. Oh, please finish your thought, Cheryl, and then we're gonna have to move on. We have a few more questions to get for y'all.
Yeah, so I think, again, with what Ed's saying in Jamaica, we saw the same thing in coffee with Jamaica with the mixture of Colombian genetics with Jamaican genetics with regards to the Blue Mountain coffee. So it's not an unusual concept, but I do stand by the fact that there are landrace strains in Jamaica. But when it comes to standards overall, I think people need to shift what they consider standards to be. How you label products, that is a standard. How you treat soil to be sold. Amazon and their regulations regards to agricultural products, or in regards to CBD products that they'll allow to be sold there. Those are all standards. So we need to make sure we don't have a narrow view on what standards look like. Recently, ASTM International created an international symbol for cannabis, which I was involved in the production of it, where it was like we start off, do we make it a stop sign? Do we make it a caution sign? What colors do we use? It ended up being, again, we don't want to say stop because we don't believe cannabis is dangerous. As Ed has indicated, there's been, there aren't any deaths that can be associated with cannabis. It's not a danger to society. Neither are the producers a danger to society and the public. However, there are standards that have been designed for a number of products, whether it's hockey sticks, whether it's face masks. Just because something is a standard doesn't mean it's intended to suppress a free and open market. But that is something that we need to have in our guidelines as far as when we're creating standards to make sure that we are not restricting access to the industry. And as the chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Subcommittee of ASTM D37, it's something I'm very passionate about. And I do raise a flag when it's like, is this necessary? Or is this something that a company who also sits in our group wants to put in place because they're the only ones who can do it? So I am passionately agreeing with Ed. I think where we do deviate is like, what is a standard? And are standards necessary? I think standards are necessary, but I have a broader view of what a standard looks like. It can include labeling and things like that. So thank you for the opportunity to respond to Ed's comments.
No, thank you, guys. I appreciate the debate. We're coming up close to our time here, so I wanted to get a quick round robin. I wanted to start with Michael, just because Royal Gold is such a part of the Humboldt community and legacy growers is such a big part of what y'all do. Can you talk a little bit about the balance between the future of cannabis and where legacy growers fit in it for you?
Well, it's such a huge subject. And, being in Humboldt, I think part of what made Humboldt so special and able to exist, and to echo Ed's point of why it's turning into a backwater, as he eloquently predicted to me personally almost 15 years ago, logistics are everything, and exposure to the market is everything. So it's like this legacy community that was the heart of cultivation. It's not that there's not room for these cultivators, it's that they can't exist doing what they did in the place they did the way they did it before in the modern market. And that's a huge detriment to the industry overall. And I do feel like it's really important to have some level of standards, not necessarily for the cannabis, but for specifically contaminants. And I do think they need to go backwards into food and have more realistic standards for the safety of our food that more mirror the safety of our medicine, and not the other way around. We don't need to relax it and allow pesticides and fungicides. We need to flip it the other way, so we're not feeding it to our children on these ridiculous standards for food. But, as far as it goes, the legacy cultivators here, many of them are leaving. It's only the ones that had enough balls to go all the way for it, enough, fearlessness to go all the way for it early and really push the boundaries in order to actually set up a foothold to compete with this corporate cannabis. And with what's going on in, Half Moon Bay, Salinas, Santa Barbara, they are still not going to be able to compete. You're looking at 5 million square feet coming online in Southern California. How can all of these independent farmers in Humboldt, in Mendocino, in Trinity, in the backwoods agricultural regions of any state, how can they realistically compete with this type of industrial model that's closer to the consumer? And there's just not a realistic way except for by joining forces and elevating as a community together. And that's proven to be incredibly difficult for outlaw type community people with a fierce sense of individuality.
Well, it's one of the things that makes the industry so great is the kind of folks that it attracts. And I see Colin shaking your head. Did you want to weigh in on?
Well, I think I've had this conversation so many times now. It's circular for me, but you're absolutely right, Michael. And the issue is that anybody that goes and tries to centralize and help is still pulling profit, which is normal. You have to make money, but because it's cannabis, that profit is still exorbitant. You're talking about an industry or a culture and a space in the industry that has had its value reduced, not by quantity, by multiples of 10, not by 50%, where when I was in the growing side, it was $6,000 a pound. It's $350, right? So you're talking about something that's really fallen off, but it is difficult. How do you save something like that? And I look at, I think, and I hope something like, the grape industry or the wine industry could be a model for that part of the country in cannabis. And, I know there's people who are pushing that direction to kind of save that legacy, more of a touristy, although, and still producing type of situation. Also, it wouldn't be too bad if we could get a little interstate commerce to to move a little product to balance
it's almost
out.
Too late.
Come on, there are two things that you said. One was to sort of make it an appellation, and also to bring tourists up. But think about this: in Sonoma and Napa, where people go for wine tasting. Don't you think that some of those wineries are going to get licenses so that they can have lounges and tasting? So then why would a person travel 5 hours to go up to Humboldt when they can have this luxurious vacation an hour and a half from, especially tourists, an hour and a half from or an hour from San Francisco? So that's
right,
another.
It's not an easy answer, and I'm not sure that there is an answer that will salvage it. It's just one of those things. Like, I'm passionate about the area personally because that's where I grew up. Not where I grew up personally, but where my company grew up. And we look at this all the time. Like, how can we help? For so many years, that area of the country built my company, and now we're looking at that area falling off and actually going to be in worse condition than what Oregon was a couple of years ago. And the question I have is, like, what can I do personally? And I don't have an answer yet because I need some partners to make that happen. We can't. GreenBroz doesn't have the ability to go and set up processing facilities, which I wouldn't mind being a part of. But I don't have the capital to do it. Right? Would that save the industry? I don't even know if that will save. It could help. It's interesting.
Well, people didn't go up to Humboldt because of the great agricultural area that it was. They went up to Humboldt because it, of safety reasons regarding the law, right?
Yeah.
So the reality is that it isn't an agricultural area, really, for the most part, and things change.
Yeah, no, that's very true.
Things change.
True.
Yeah,
and
I'd like to move on.
One thing that's not going to save it, though, is limiting the legacy and home growers. That is not the impact that is going to change the trajectory of what's going on here in Humboldt or in California in general. And this big push to create a felony again for home cultivation, I think, is absolutely ludicrous and
that's
very
insane.
Short-sighted, and is corporate cannabis voting for it, not legacy or regulated cannabis on small scale.
That's a conflict between the corporations and the consumers. That is the conflict, that people should have the right for free legal backyard marijuana, and not everybody in California has that right. It depends. California is bifurcated. You're in one county, you can grow. In another county, you can't. We're all Californians. We should be able to grow, and it should not be a plant count.
Well, on that note, we're all in America too, and we should all get to do that too.
Yeah.
Guys, we're coming up on the end, but I want to give a little bit of space since it is 420. I'd like to ask each of you about a person or a business or organization that you would like to highlight for our fellow presenters and the folks watching at home. I'm going to start with you, Cheryl.
Yeah, I didn't get to do my roundup. So first, I think as we approach federal legalization, we need to put some efforts in preserving our cultural identity and our existing licensed participants as well as our legacy participants. So I put my mileage in, I put my time in as far as legalization going from state to state. I'm really proud of that work. This next phase in my career and in my life is really about protecting legacy operators. I want to highlight the Parabola Center. They've done a great job of having amendment recommendations for the MORE Act, the Marijuana Opportunity and I think it's Reinvestment and Expungement Act. So take a look at go to the Parabola Center's website and look at their recommendations. Even with interstate commerce, which was alluded to, there's a way that we can do it so that small participants may have that first run of it and have that first opportunity so that they're not gobbled up by multi-state operators. I do want to highlight or shout out Steve D'Angelo, who I'm also working with on a blueprint for doing some legacy work from one state to the other state, starting in the New York market, just because of, it's a shift from cultivation, but to legacy distribution and legacy organizations. So we're going to be focused on that work. I look forward to everyone joining in because it is important work. To get in touch with me, you can email me at smpesquire@outlook.com. That's smpesquire@outlook.com, or you can go on my website, cheryl.com. But thank you for this opportunity to have an audience with GreenBroz and your entire distribution list, and to have the honor of being on a panel with yourself, Wes, Colin, Ed, and also Michael.
Thank you, Cheryl. Pleasure's ours. I hope we can get you back soon.
Thank you.
Ed, do you have a person or business? We got to go real fast, though.
Yeah, well, it's the Last Prisoner Project, which Cheryl just mentioned, in part run by Steve D'Angelo, and nobody should be in prison for marijuana. Absolutely nobody. I don't care whether they were selling illegally or what. Nobody should be in prison for cannabis. And Last Prisoner Project is trying to get those people out. We don't need any legacy prisoners.
100%. Michael?
I would like to shout out almost as much a concept as an organization, and the organization would be Humboldt County Growers Alliance and Trinity County Agriculture Alliance, and the concept of organizing at a local level to contribute on up through the systems all the way to get to state and federal level. We need to organize these legacy individuals to have their voices heard. It's not enough for Ed and Cheryl and everyone out there to be banging the drum. We all need our individual voices to be heard, and don't get caught up in these legislation items when they're happening in an eagerness to be accepted and to be legalized. Make sure the language in the laws is supporting what we want to see. We saw a big bait and switch in California. You're going to see it everywhere else. It is happening. Be aware, get involved, support your local growers alliances.
Heck yeah. Colin?
I just want to tell all my veteran brothers and sisters, I love you, man. A big part of who I am and what we do, and we just love our veteran community, and we support you guys 100%. And, I know that there's a lot of vets working in the cannabis space. And so not anybody specifically, but just my veterans.
Thank you, Colin. Well, that was a wonderful panel, guys. I really hope we can have you all back soon. I'd like to do a quick draw for our grand prize, and then we'll say goodbye to our audience. Oh, Cheryl already said goodbye.
That was in error. I'm still here.
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
How can I leave before the grand prize? Are you kidding
know,
me?
Cheryl, you're... Okay. And we'll be reaching out to our winner afterwards. All right, Lisa. Well, thank you, everybody. It's been great getting to spend this time with you. Have a happy and fun 420 out there. And we'll see you all next month for our next webinar. Thank you again.
Thank you all.
Happy 420, everyone.
Happy 420.
Cheers.
Get involved.
You bet.